This is the beginning of Active Shooter Response Module 4. Michael Melton is the instructor, and this course was developed for Los Angeles County Department of Public Health, and I'm now presenting it for public viewing. We're in the first part of response that uses tactics from other disciplines. We're going to do law enforcement disciplines with this part, and then in future parts we'll do military and emergency management tactics. Knowledge is power, but perspective matters. Just as this simple example, consider looking at this object from directly overhead. It appears to be a circle. If you look at the same object from the side, it appears to be a triangle. But in fact, the object is, in 3D view, a cone. So we're going to stay with the three strategies of run, hide, fight, but we're going to add different lenses of how we look at them, how we understand those strategies. And these lenses are taken from the different disciplines that I have worked in over the years: the law enforcement and security discipline, the military discipline, and emergency management discipline. Through looking at the run, hide, fight strategies from these different perspectives, you'll get a deeper understanding, which will give you a better chance of applying the strategy correctly to your best advantage if you're in an active shooter situation, which will be very stressful. We're going to talk about some countermeasures from law enforcement, and part of that is talking about rings of protection, and then hardening the target, and finally integrating these three core strategies of run, hide, fight with these different tools of countermeasures, rings of protection, and hardening the target. One of the tools that law enforcement uses is hiding in plain sight. This can involve disguise. It can involve items not being marked as to what their content is. Here you have an owl picture where the owl's camouflage is significantly covering the owl's appearance, and they're also secreted within a hole in the tree. The other owl is right on the surface of the tree, but that owl's camouflage is so excellent that it's very hard to make him out. The active shooter event, hiding in plain sight, most often might mean playing dead. Now, playing dead, again, as with pleading to the suspect's sense of humanity, is not your plan A, B, or C. Hiding in plain sight, playing dead is not your plan A, B, or C, but it has worked. It worked in an incident in Turkey where 600 people were in a bar and the shooter came in, and there was one American rolled out in a wheelchair and he had been wounded in his leg, and he said the only reason he was alive is he played dead. In the San Bernardino shooting incident, a young lady played dead and she was not shot. In the Uvalde shooting incident most recently, a young child played dead. She even had the insight to use some of our friend's blood to make her disguise more convincing, and she was not shot. So hiding in plain sight is a tool in your toolbox. The progressive security strategies or countermeasures. This begins with deterrence. Examples of deterrence would be required to wear visual ID, having security cameras in the building, weapons screening, and maybe even vehicle checks prior to entering the parking area, and fencing. Then detection, weapons screening, again for detection, but also staff moving around, such as security staff or cameras being used for detecting unusual behavior. Delay, locked doors, again, fencing. You put away valuables or other items so that they were hard to find is delay. But in the case of active shooter, you're hiding and barricading doors are examples of delay. Response, all of the run, hide, fight strategies are part of response. But then there's also summoning assistance from law enforcement or security, as well as viewing the videotapes would be part of response. Finally, consequences. Usually in law enforcement, the consequences are the judicial system. However, in the instance where the suspect parked the truck in the driveway of a residence and claimed to have a bomb in the truck, the victims engaged in a response that inflicted a consequence. They struck the person with large sticks, causing injury, which ultimately sent him to the hospital, which is how we ended up arresting him. So response and consequences kind of go together there. In the application of these countermeasures, and under those five major headings are the different countermeasures that can be used for law enforcement. I'm sorry, for the active shooter event. You can see here that I've identified some specific ones that are most applicable to active shooter, such as the detection, the security system, and the weapon screening, the response by the security personnel or law enforcement, the see something, say something, and all three strategies of the run, hide, fight. Now we switch to the rings of protection or layers of protection. If you think about how the Secret Service engages in protecting the president, the key starting point for this strategy of security or law enforcement is that you identify the core asset that you're trying to protect. So, in the case of Secret Service, the core asset is the president. In the case of a jewelry store, the core asset would be the jewelry frequently. So, in an active shooter event, the core asset you're trying to protect is yourself. And you want to then apply multiple layers or rings of protection from the countermeasures. So, the outer ring, you have the lighting and fencing and other things that might either deter or delay. In the middle ring, you have the locked doors and the receptionist and badge wearing requirement that either detect or delay. And in the innermost ring, then you have the items that are most directly impacting the person would be alert personnel that could respond, and your use of the response tactics to hide or to get cover from the shooter and lock the doors. So those barricaded doors might be the center, but the blue ring there at the inner ring. But ultimately, the improvised weapons that you might have as part of the response would also be there in that center. So, how these two different strategies, the progressive security strategies that has a list of countermeasures under each of the five headings, and the progressive rings that has the series of rings of protection, these two interrelate because the rings are represented by specific countermeasures that you select from the progressive security strategy option. So for applying this to a active shooter event, the outer ring, as mentioned, might be the alerting system, the cameras, or limiting access to a building. Of course, buildings that have to be open to the public have a hard time with that. Then the first backup ring, barricades or locked doors if you can, covers for the windows. The second ring might be the file cabinet you can hide behind because it offers cover, or a second door, or a desk turned over on its side. And the third inner ring might be the shield, projectiles to throw, to hurt, or distract the person, the suspect. And then the innermost ring, really the improvised weapons for fighting and your attitude to really be committed to saving your own life and taking the suspect down if that's what's necessary. So as you apply these collectively, the one slide showed how the different phased countermeasures can be employed in the rings of protection as an integrated solution. What you're really trying to do is harden the target. And law enforcement has used the term harden the target in their community preparedness, community education for years, such as you want to encourage a double key deadbolt lock on the exit doors so that the suspect that might break in through a window can't carry your television set out through the front door, and consequently they don't end up escaping with the television set because they can't get the door open since it's a double key deadbolt. You want to harden the target. Does not mean that the crime will not occur. Bad guys will typically be bad guys. It's just that you won't be the victim who suffers the consequence of the crime, because the difficulty or risk associated with victimizing you is greater than the difficulty or risk associated with victimizing someone else. So in case of applying this harden the target, you might run in a zigzag course to make it more difficult to hit you. Run from cover to cover to cover, back and forth, only being exposed a minimum period of time, using heavy items, metal items to hide behind so that it actually stops the bullet, and using anything that might distract or hurt the vision of the suspect to prevent the suspect from being effective, are all ways that you would harden the target and possibly cause the suspect to move on in their attack to another target. So we've prior to this section 4, we had you at a level of wearing camouflage and having the right shoes. In fight now, why would I have a photo of hand lotion in the image? Well, when the suspect in the run, hide, fight video was planning to come through a door, uh, could the persons who were waiting as a coordinated group to attack the suspect, could they have potentially gained advantage by putting hand sanitizer, dish soap, hand lotion on a hardened floor to make that floor slippery so that the suspect would lose his footing and be easier to tackle? Why would the fire extinguisher you saw in that run, hide, fight video, the one of the persons that was engaged in the coordinated attack used the fire extinguisher as a hard object to swing at the suspect? We know that the suspect needs visibility to have effective use of the firearm. So if you spray the CO2 in the suspect's face and hamper the suspect's visibility before striking the suspect in the head with the hard object, that could be a better use. You would have a harder target. The knowledge is power, but application is gold. Uh, it's kind of embarrassing. I mentioned previously that I was at the Navy, in the Navy as a young man, and one of the things I learned was the navigation lights of red to the right, red to starboard, green to port to the left. And I was recently in a vacation on a trip in Alaska, and we were returning in a rainstorm in a boat on the river in rain at night, just myself and my Yupik friend. And even though it was dark, we could see that there was another boat approaching us, and we could see the red and green lights. But even though we knew that the red and green lights had this navigational meaning of the front of a boat, we both mistakenly dismissed that the boat was coming at us until it was right on top of us. And my friend had to make a very sudden movement with the boat, and the bow of the approaching boat only struck the stern of our boat and glanced off. So that was a case where we very easily could have had a serious injury or even our boat being sunk had we not been able to move right at the last minute. But the bottom line was we were operating without our own navigation lights, and we didn't take an opportunity to shine the flashlight at the approaching boat, whose visibility was hampered by rain on his windshield. So we definitely failed to use knowledge that we had in an appropriate way. And you want to make sure you don't find yourself in that situation from this knowledge that you're acquiring through this course. Try to think through scenarios. At the end of the course, I'm going to give you a couple of tools that you can fill out. One is your personal action plan for the run, hide, fight strategy, and the other is an assessment of interior rooms in your building to identify what we call safer rooms that you could potentially use as a secure location from the suspect's assault. And so you want to try to use these different tools and possibly review this material periodically as a means of keeping the information more fresh in your mind. So that part 5 here, we will get into the military tactics. That'll be coming up next. And my contact information is provided here.